Welcome to Lesson 2 of Module 2, which focuses on GDPR for healthcare workers. In this second lesson of this module, we will focus on specific requirements for healthcare organizations, introduce the concepts of data protection by design and default, and discuss data breach notifications. In the previous lesson of this module, we explored the GDPR principle of transparency and outlined some of the actions you need to take to implement it, and ensure that all sensitive patient data is handled in accordance with the GDPR. This falls under what is called compliance with the GDPR, meaning that you and your organization must adhere to the GDPR. However, to fully comply with the GDPR, another step is required called accountability. This means that you and your organization are responsible for demonstrating your compliance with GDPR. You must be able to prove that you are following the law and have mechanisms in place to respond to data breaches or privacy inquiries. In concrete terms, this generally means that nurses' administrative staff should keep records of all data processing activities related to patient care. This includes documenting when and why data was accessed, shared, or modified. In case of a data breach, you should be prepared to report it to the relevant authorities and patients promptly. We will talk more about what you might be required to do in case of data breach at the end of the video. Both complying with the GDPR and being able to account for your compliance are dependent on the integration of data protection measures into the design and operation of systems, processes, and services from the very beginning. This approach ensures that data privacy and security are not merely add-ons, but are integral parts of the entire data processing lifecycle of your organization. Perhaps you will remember that in the very first lesson of this training program, we already spoke about cybersecurity breaches. We defined them as something that happens when unauthorized parties access sensitive information through such actions as hacking, phishing, or exploiting system vulnerabilities. When a data breach happens, something called data breach notification come into play. What does data breach notification signify? Under the GDPR, data breach notification refers to the requirement for organizations to report certain types of data breaches to the appropriate supervisory authority and, in some cases, to affected individuals. The GDPR sets specific timeframes for reporting data breaches. According to Article 33 of the GDPR, organizations are generally required to notify the relevant supervisory authority, typically the data protection authority in the respective EU member state, of a data breach without undue delay and where feasible no later than 72 hours after becoming aware of the breach. This 72-hour timeframe begins from the moment your organization becomes aware of the breach. It doesn't necessarily mean that your organization must have all the details about the breach within that time, but it must report it within 72 hours of becoming aware. Another relevant article in this context is Article 34 of the GDPR, which outlines the circumstances under which organizations must communicate a data breach to affected individuals. If a breach is likely to result in a high risk to individuals' rights and freedoms, organizations must inform those individuals directly and without undue delay. There is no specific time limit like the 72-hour rule for notifying supervisory authorities, but the emphasis is on notifying affected individuals promptly once your organization becomes aware of the breach. It's important to note that the GDPR recognizes that in some cases, organizations may not have all the details about a breach within this initial 72-hour timeframe. In such situations, they're expected to provide initial information and then follow up with additional details as they become available. Failure to report a data breach within the specified timeframes can result in fines and penalties under the GDPR. Therefore, healthcare organizations must have procedures and mechanisms in place to detect, assess, and report data breaches in a timely manner to comply with these notification requirements. You may have specific roles and responsibilities when it comes to complying with the data breach notification rules. Let us look at some concrete examples of activities you might be requested to carry out. Ideally, you would have received training that allows you to recognize signs of a data breach, such as unauthorized access to patient records, data leaks, or suspicious activities in the healthcare information system. You would then be able to actively monitor access logs and records for unusual or unauthorized access to patient data. You would also know to be vigilant for any physical breaches such as lost or stolen patient files or devices containing patient information. Also, you would know what you should report any suspicious incidents or data breaches promptly to the designated contact person in your organization responsible for data breaches and provide all relevant details. In the actual event of a data breach, you should document the details of the incident thoroughly. This might include creating a detailed incident report, including the date, time, location, and nature of the breach. You should document what patient data was affected and how it may have been compromised. And you should gather any evidence related to the breach, such as access logs or witness statements. In some cases, data breaches may require further investigation by data protection authorities. In this case, you should be prepared to cooperate with the organization's designated contact person for data breaches and external authorities, providing them with request information and access to the relevant systems. You may also be asked to assist in identifying the root causes of the breach and implementing corrective actions to prevent future incidents. Additionally, depending on the severity of the data breach, individuals affected by the breach may need to be notified. Here you might be involved in drafting and delivering notifications to affected individuals, explaining the nature of the breach, potential risks, and recommended actions. Your own organization will have its own procedures and rules in place that will outline what you need to do in terms of data breach. We have come to the end of this video. Let us just recap what you have learned so far. In the 2 lessons of the second module, you gained an understanding of how the GDPR affects your daily work. In terms of patient data protection under the GDPR, you heard about the principle of transparency, which is important in complying with the GDPR, and you learned more about what actually constitutes sensitive patient data. You also learned about compliance, accountability, and data protection by design and default in the context of the GDPR. And finally, you found out about what you can do in case of cybersecurity data breach. In conclusion, the GDPR has numerous implications for the healthcare sector, and you must understand their obligations, including obtaining informed consent, allowing patients access and rectification rights, and ensuring data protection by design and default, to name but a few. Understanding these regulations can help you build patient trust and protect your organization from hefty fines and reputational damage. Remember, this is a broad overview, and the exact details of how these principles apply can depend on specific circumstances and jurisdictions. Always consult with a designated professional in your organization for guidance specific to your situation. Thank you for your attention.